Hi everyone, my name is Angela, and today we're here with Paul Johnson. Paul is a CA qualified senior finance manager with over 14 years experience within Australian, Asian, and UK markets. Paul is currently a business controller at Rabobank Australia here in Sydney. Prior to that, he was an AVP of global finance at Barclays in Singapore. Paul was also a financial controller at RBS and an audit executive at Grant Thornton in the UK. So hi, Paul, how are you?
Hi, Angela. Great, thank you. A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining. So we're going to start with, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Okay. So, look, I grew up in the UK, spent the sort of early years of my life there. I went to university and studied economics at Warwick. And after that, I decided to train as a chartered accountant in London. So I spent 3-4 years doing that. And then decided that I wanted to move into industry. So I moved into banking and, as you say, became financial controller in RBS, which was really interesting time just after the financial crisis and sort of trying to sort of pick up the pieces of things there. Since then, I've done a sort of a variety of roles, spent some time in London and then moved to Singapore to join Barclays there, still in investment banking. And then more recently, I moved to Sydney to be with Rabobank.
Mm-hmm. Could you please give us a brief overview of what you do day to day at work?
Yeah. So as a business controller, I look after the budgeting, forecasting and financial planning process. That's really about sort of making sure businesses have targets that they understand and agree to, and then we sort of measure against this to make sure that their performance is tracking in a way that they're expecting. Mm-hmm. I also look after management reporting, which is then for the senior stakeholders to sort of give them a snapshot and an understanding of how things are going and where things might need sort of input from them.
Okay, so what do you like about your job?
Well, yeah, look, my role at the moment is pretty interesting. I mean, actually, all the finance is a bit like this, but particularly the business control role. We get to speak to an awful lot of people across the organisation. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we get a really good insight into what's happening in the company and also more broadly in the market. So look, yeah, it's a really good position to be in if you sort of want to know, how a company works and all the things that go into making a successful company.
So could you tell us more about how your industry, so banking industry, has changed?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this one, thinking back the 14 over years that you mentioned at the beginning there. It seems ridiculous to say, but when I first started out in audit, we were still really a paper-based industry, if you like. So I remember having to cart big paper folders of documentation and things between client offices and our audit offices. And really the sort of the concept of using Excel for big data and performing analytics and things wasn't really there when I first started. I mean, it wasn't unusual actually to receive like a trial balance or an extract from a ledger in hard copy, and then someone would have to go and sort of add it up, check it all made sense and sort of tick it back to make sense of it, which these days sounds crazy. Whereas, now I think how the industry's developed, I see that we're sort of much more data driven, much more focused onto what data can do for us. I see finance now as rather than just being sort of like a preparer or a checker, we're now more in this position where we're actually looking to add value to the business. We're looking to challenge our stakeholders, provide insights, and actually help them see what's happening in the numbers. And the way we can do that is got on top of the fact that data is really key. And a lot of companies have invested a lot of money and time in sort of getting proper data models and systems that finance people kind of rely on and tell the stories with, rather than just being bogged down in sort of checking and making sure that, add things up. So yes, it's quite a shift, definitely for the positive. But yes, I think in summary, really, finance for me is changed from just being sort of purely a custodian role, purely making sure you don't spend too much or you make sure things are sort of reported correctly, to much more of a sort of business partner, value-adding role. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think is the most important skill and attitude in your profession?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I mean, there's loads, but I think the two words came to mind, and they're sort of interlinked, really. So to really succeed in the profession, you have to be agile. And I suppose that I say that because a reflection of how the industry changes. People think of finance being quite stable and consistent, but actually my experience has been that it is dynamic and lots of things come along the way that you need to sort of pivot and adapt to. So the people who are sort of prepared to get stuck in and try something new, demonstrating agility, they're the people who sort of really have excelled. I'd say the other word that sprang to mind for me was resilience. So look, particularly in the banking industry, I found that it's not always plain sailing. that there are difficult times and you have to have difficult conversations sometimes, and that there are days when you sort of get really fed up. And look, I think that's pretty normal in probably every job, but I'd say certainly in finance, resilience is important because, often you're dealing with either quite complex things or you're having conversations that have quite significant impacts to the people you're having them with. So, being able to hold in there and be consistent and continue is really important.
What kind of people do you enjoy interacting with in your profession?
Yeah, look, that's a good question, actually. I think similar to sort of the skill set that I mentioned just before, I think the people I kind of thrive on are the people who are sort of ready to get stuck in, ready for the challenge, want to do things a little bit differently. I think I get a bit of energy from those people because in a changing industry, it's always hard if you're dealing with people who don't want to change and are resistant to it, because you spend a lot of time and effort in sort of working through that with those people. But where you actually have people who are on board and giving ideas, pushing for change and things like that, you get some momentum and you can really see things happening. So I really enjoyed that.
Okay. So the next question, what's the most important leadership lesson you've learned?
The leaders that I've sort of really looked up to, they have this ability to make good decisions quickly and effectively. What I've seen as well is where that doesn't happen, it can often have quite a negative impact on the sort of environment that you're in. Things can drag on. People don't really know what they're supposed to be doing, and discontent can sort of begin to sow within the team. So I think really for me that sort of the key lesson there is that having the ability to get a hold of all the information you need to and review it impartially and make a quick decision is really effective and sort of really helps the people around you.
Okay, so if you didn't choose the field you're in now, where would you be?
Yeah, there's a few options that I had in mind. Most of them are quite frivolous and probably not that realistic. But if I think back to being a kid, I always wanted to be a racing driver. Now that didn't happen. So, accountant was second on that. But that's pretty unrealistic because obviously I wasn't really racing cars and things as a youngster. To give you a slightly more realistic one, probably what I would have ended up doing is going into some sort of music career. Because I was quite interested in music at high school. I played violin and guitar throughout high school, and when I came to go to university, that was kind of on I was seriously considering whether to go into something music related, but the appeal of going into more business oriented commercial side of things kind of pulled me towards economics, and then finance. But that could have been music. Yeah.
You haven't thought about going into like Sony music or like commercial like industry where it's like music based?
That's a good question. No, I think I sort of always enjoyed banking. I sort of enjoy the culture of banking. Happy where I am. So I think to get to music, I'd probably want to be playing. So
wow. So do you still play?
Well, funnily enough, my son is in year one. He's just starting to learn the violin. So I decided to pick it up again with him. So my violin's still in England for various reasons. Never managed to bring it over. So he's actually got a hold of, they have an arrangement with the school where they hire an instrument for him. And when we're doing that, we sort of found out we could hire one for me as well. So I've started, picked it back up with him, which is nice. So it's quite a good way to release and sort of unwind. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the next question, do you have a value that you live by?
I have a few. I think the main one in finance profession that I subscribe to throughout my life is about having integrity. And what I mean by that is by doing the right thing. So, I find that important. If something's questionable, I always kind of stop and think, okay, well, look, is this the right thing to do? And if I have that question mark, I go with my gut feeling and don't do it. So I think that's really important generally, but I think particularly in banking, finance, that's quite an important value.
Okay, so questions about mentoring. Do you have a mentor yourself? If so, how have they influenced you?
Okay, that's a good question. So I don't have a mentor at the moment, but I have in the past, and found it quite useful to have mentors. And what I've sort of enjoyed about having mentors is that it's an opportunity to hear your thoughts out aloud with someone who understands, maybe what you're going through and perhaps has gone through something similar themselves. So I've kind of used mentors to help sort of collect my thoughts and help get perspective on things before I make decisions. So look, it's quite good because they're not making the decisions for me, and they're not trying to sort of steer me in a particular way because they're sort of independent. But being able for them to be able to sort of offer their input based on their own experiences, I found really valuable and has helped me along, particularly with the sort of moving countries and things like that.
And have you been a mentor in the past, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, I've been a mentor a number of times, actually. It's quite a varied experience. I think it depends a lot on the mentee. The relationships I've found that have worked quite well are where people have wanted, have kind of sought out that relationship. They've come to me or come to their organisation and said, oh, look, I'd like a mentor, and a connection's been made. And I think the reason that those ones work is the mentees have something of a goal in mind, and then as a mentor, I'm able to sort of help talk them through that and sort of understand what their aspirations are and share my experiences about kind of how that might be related. In the instances where it doesn't work as well is where someone's been told they should have a mentor or they need a mentor, but they haven't really thought about kind of what they want to get out of that.
Yeah.
And then I think those ones tend to sort of fizzle out because the conversation doesn't really sort of flow, and they're not sure where they're going.
So how do you show others that you believe in them? So how do you show your mentees that you believe in them?
So I originally thought of this question in the context of people I work with. So in that respect, it's relatively straightforward because it'd be around what I tend to do, sort of try and give people more important work. So things that have a bit more visibility or a little bit more complicated. Well, I like to think that kind of sort of empowers them and makes them realise that I trust them with things that matter. I suppose along that process as well, I don't just kind of sort of chuck it at them and let them get on with it. I do sort of help support them through in the first few times that they're doing that sort of thing to make sure that they got a good understanding of what they need to do. And also I think when things are complete, I sort of let them take the credit for it. So that they understand that I'm not a person who is just going to sort of use them and then take the credit for them. So I think that's really important in sort of building that trust. But to answer the question from the mentee perspective, I think the trust piece there, because we're obviously not having work to sort of handle and sort of have day-to-day relationship, I think that the piece on mentees is more around being authentic. So I think by me being honest and open to the mentee, it shows that I don't have an agenda, and I'm not trying to sort of put a fast one on them or anything like that. I'm not trying to make their lives difficult. Just trying to sort of help them from an impartial perspective.
Okay, so the last question: what advice would you give to your younger self?
Okay, yeah. So look, short and sweet on this one. So I think as a young accountant starting out for the first time, I think if I look back, I wish I'd been a little bit more confident in my own abilities. Certainly for me, coming from, I hadn't grown up in London, so I was coming into London for the first time, and obviously quite a different city to where I grew up. It took a while to sort of adapt to that. So I think, being more confident from the outset. Look, you've been trained up, you know how to talk to people, that sort of thing. Just running with that would really help. And I think the other thing that I sort of noted down that is relevant, and I think my younger self was okay with this, but I think I still worth kind of drawing out, is that I think having an interest in things and a hunger to learn new things set me in quite good stead for the rest of my career. I was always interested in trying new things and just seeing how they go. That's how I ended up in Singapore, for example. If you have that hunger and you have that interest, then you find a way. You find a way to make things work. And so I think that's what I'd say to my younger self. Don't hold back. Just be confident and get on with it.
Okay. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining, Paul.
Thank you, Angela. Great to talk.